she can do this all day. Peggy Carter kicks off the Marvel Cinematic Universe's first animated project, What If, and she's ready to give Red Skull and Hydra the business. Directed by Brian Andrews, What If shows viewers a bunch of things they've seen before, but remixed in random ways, like what if Peggy Carter got the super soldier serum instead of Steve? We'll break all that down, plus when we think we'll see Captain Carter again, and what the Watcher's whole deal is, but before we get into any of that, I have to warn you, we are about to spoil episode 1 of Marvel's What If, so if you haven't seen it yet, or if you don't subscribe to any of those hypothetical alternate timeline theories, now is the time to blast off to parts unknown while we get through this. Okay, now that we're past the spoiler warning, let's get right to the big reveals. As many fans have already speculated, yes, we are getting a look at Captain Carter and a whole slew of other variant realities, thanks to Sylvie giving He Who Remains a sick new body piercing at the end of Loki. This exposes the MCU to the multiverse at large, where infinite possibilities exist, and we know all this thanks to Uatu the Watcher, one of the oldest beings in the universe. We'll break down Uatu and why he's important in a minute, but he's basically watching and documenting everything that happens across the whole multiverse.
I observe all that transpires here, but I do not, cannot, will not interfere.
Anyway, back to Captain Carter, which is really just a recap, get it, of Captain America the First Avenger, with a few major changes. Peggy winds up taking the super soldier serum instead of Steve, and becomes a super soldier as a result. In this version of World War II Earth, Peggy was the one to get Dr. Erskine's super soldier serum after the Germans try to sabotage the project.
There. That's the moment that created a new universe.
Going off what we learned from Loki prior to He Who Remains' death, the TVA would normally pop through a time portal here, arrest Peggy Carter, and wipe this timeline from existence with a good old-fashioned time charge. But with nobody behind the wheel at the TVA, this variant timeline is allowed to continue and flourish. And hey, don't worry about Steve. Instead of completing the transformation into Captain America, Steve becomes a hero of a different kind. In this timeline, Howard Stark got his hands on the Tesseract a lot earlier and used it to power an Iron Man-like suit, which Steve now wears into battle as Hydra Stomper. Smash cut to a cool montage of Captain Carter and Hydra Stomper, stomping Hydra, just like our Steve did back in the main timeline, which leads us to the train mission. You know, the one where Bucky falls off during the fight? Yeah, same situation, except this time, it's Steve who goes missing. So Captain Carter leads the Howling Commandos on a suicide mission to destroy the Hydra stronghold and the Red Skull along with it. The plan is going great, and hey, there's Steve Rogers, held captive by the Red Skull, who is using the Tesseract to create a portal to summon the champion of Hydra, which is just another way of saying a giant tentacle monster. Hey, do you think they designed the Hydra logo after this thing, or is that just a coincidence? So anyway, our heroes battle the giant Hydra logo until Captain Carter sees an opening to shove the thing back through the portal from whence it came, and here's where she does the same thing Steve did back in the main timeline. She sacrificed herself to save the world, and she even promises Steve a dance in the process.
Saturday night!
The Hydra machinery explodes, leaving only the Tesseract and a crestfallen Steve Rogers behind. We see Captain Carter again in the very next scene. Nick Fury and Hawkeye use the Tesseract to zap her into what looks like the SHIELD facility that Loki used in the first Avengers film. Anyway, Fury fills her in.
The war ended almost 70 years ago.
Of course, Fury did the same thing for Steve back in the main timeline, which is just before Steve helps lead the Avengers to victory at the Battle of New York. So where does Captain Carter go next? Well, regardless of what you think of her, MCU fans might want to get used to the new Captain because it appears as if we'll be seeing more of her in the future. In a recent press conference, What If executive producer Brad Winterbaum said Captain Carter will be featured in every season of the show as she quickly emerged as a standout character who had a strong connection to the Watcher, the ancient multiversal being driving the whole series. So we'll see her again in future seasons of What If, but could we eventually see Captain Carter in the live-action main MCU timeline? We say it's entirely possible, and here's why. The Peggy Carter we know is no longer with us in that timeline, as she passed away during the events of Captain America's Civil War, but that doesn't mean that Captain Carter couldn't eventually make her way to that timeline and fight in the upcoming multiversal war with whatever Avengers team assembles to stop it. There are also rumors that Haley Atwell could reprise the role next year in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Also consider this, ever since WandaVision, fans have speculated that this whole multiversal business is most likely the way Marvel Studios is going to sneak mutants into the MCU, and now post-Loki, we still agree that makes a lot of sense. So if that eventually happens and mutants are finally introduced into the MCU, that would require them to be transported from whatever variant Earth they're currently on to the one the Avengers protect in the main MCU timeline.
I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these vast new realities.
So, like we mentioned earlier, all of this, including the premise of the show itself, is relayed to us by Jeffrey Wright as Uatu the Watcher. Real quick comic book history on the Watchers: they are a race of super ancient beings who are committed to observing all that goes down in the universe. They are just not supposed to interfere at all, just observe and document. It's also worth noting that when the Watcher shows up in Marvel Comics, it's usually timed with some major existence-level cataclysmic threat. So why is Uatu popping up in the MCU now? Because the multiverse just got unleashed thanks to Sylvie's shenanigans, and now, boom, he's here. Most likely to observe the events leading to the Multiversal War reference in Miss Minutes' cheeky TVA orientation cartoon. But here's another key bit of intel on Uatu. On more than one occasion, he has violated official Watcher policy and gotten involved with the dealings of the superheroes of Earth, and we think he might do that again by the end of this series. And honestly, a 9-foot-tall voyeuristic baby in a toga showing up and saying, "Don't mind me, everybody," kind of has the potential to interfere with whatever's going on anyway, regardless of what the situation is. I mean, that makes an elephant in the room look pretty normal by comparison. When Uatu has gone off-book in the comics and revealed himself, it's usually to aid the Fantastic Four, like the time he tried to keep the Silver Surfer and Galactus from showing up and devouring everything. His reasoning? That Galactus was the only being in the universe with power great enough to match that of the Watchers. So it doesn't matter what Uatu says. If the multiversal danger is great enough, he will interfere. So what could create that kind of danger? Well, Galactus, obviously, but we don't think that guy's going to show up in the MCU for quite a while. But the multiversal war we learned about in Loki could be a pretty good candidate until then. Keep your eyes open for the multiversal threat that brings Uatu the Watcher off the sidelines and into the action, because that is the moment when characters like Captain Carter, the Mutants, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, all those guys can break through to the proper MCU timeline. But again, all of this is happening, or at least we're witnessing this happen, because of Sylvie's decision to kill He Who Remains in the Loki Season 1 finale. The trickster god of mischief, or at least the variant we followed through that series, is going to have to grapple with the personal ramifications of Sylvie's decision once Season 2 rolls around. So far, all the action happening out in the multiverse still seems like it's contained to its own universe, and nothing seems to threaten to cross over into the MCU's sacred timeline, but that's definitely where we think this is headed eventually. Marvel Studios reps have been pretty clear that this animated series very much is in the proper MCU canon. And why? Why create an animated anthology about the multiverse unless it connects back to the canon that we know? We already know that Kang the Conqueror and his many variants will very likely become the MCU's new answer to Thanos, and the multiversal war we learned about in Loki is likely the new Infinity Saga. Uatu the Watcher is going to get involved, which will lead to consequences that will ripple across the multiverse. What If will continue to show us new versions of characters as we bounce around realities in the multiverse. We think it's safe to expect that characters like Captain Carter may eventually make their way to the main timeline. Of course, our Steve Rogers already has a bit of experience with the multiverse, what with the whole time travel, returning of the Infinity Stones and all that. It'd be nice if Steve could just explain some of that and how it all works. Was his Peggy a variant? Did he have to fight Red Skull on Vormir? Honestly, Steve, just clear this up for us and just break it down a little bit, will you, please?
No, I don't think I will.
Before we get to Easter eggs, Captain Carter herself, Hayley Atwell, posted on Instagram about her return to the Peggy Carter role, which is also the debut of a brand new character. She writes, quote, "Here she is, our Peg, in a greater position of visibility and power, raising the standards for female representation in this genre. I love my Marvel family and their expansive visions. It's good to see Agent Carter return." Okay, now it's time for Easter eggs, and honestly the whole episode is basically an Easter egg, so make of that what you will. Case in point, the title of the show, What If, of course comes from Marvel Comics. The first issue of What If dropped in 1977 and did the exact same thing this show is doing, relaying tales from alternate universes, showing different versions of our favorite Marvel characters, and Uatu is the one breaking it all down in print as well as on screen. Speaking of the Watcher, we first saw the MCU's Watchers in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 as the late great Stan the Man Lee regaled them with tales of his various cameo exploits throughout the other Marvel films. Excelsior, Stan, we miss you. There's a lot of folks out there saying that Captain Carter is What If's Captain Britain, and we're gonna have to disagree with you there. Captain Britain, otherwise known as Brian Braddock, is endowed with magical powers by Merlin, the Arthurian wizard, and he later organizes Excalibur, which is the UK's super team, kind of like a mix between Avengers and X-Men. So you can see why Captain Britain is a totally different character. And yes, Peggy's sporting a Union Jack-inspired supersuit, but that is the only aspect she shares with Captain Britain. This is Captain Carter, not the same. Got it? The other notable Easter eggs in this episode come from the voice cast. Almost all of the main cast of Captain America the First Avenger are back to reprise their roles. Stanley Tucci is back as Dr. Erskine, Sebastian Stan is Bucky, Dominic Cooper is Howard Stark, Samuel L. Jackson plays Nick Fury, Neil McDonough is back as Dum Dum Dugan, and Toby Jones returns as the Hydra scientist Arnim Zola. Bradley Whitford makes an appearance as John Flynn, his character from the Agent Carter one-shot. This was the only big connection we could find to the Agent Carter series in this episode of What If, but of course John Flynn didn't appear in the series, but the one-shot definitely led to Agent Carter getting made in the first place.
The Third Reich will fall, and Hydra will rise from its ashes.
That wasn't Hugo Weaving voicing Red Skull, but you do know that voice. That's Ross Marquand, who Walking Dead fans know as the character Aaron from that universe. Marquand is a gifted impressionist and does a mean Hugo Weaving, as we've already heard him voicing Red Skull in Infinity War and in Endgame, and here he is once again reprising his role as everybody's favorite angry red skeleton Nazi guy, whatever Red Skull's deal is. That's everyone, right? There's gotta be someone I'm missing. Oh right, Steve! That is not Chris Evans playing little skinny Steve from Brooklyn. That is voice actor Josh Keaton, and you might know his voice from the Spectacular Spider-Man, where he plays the web-swinging menace himself. Also, the champion of Hydra, the huge tentacle monster that may or may not have inspired their logos, that very well could have been Shuma Gorath, one of the great old ones from Marvel Comics, which in no way was inspired by anything written by one H.P. Lovecraft. Now, this isn't an Easter egg, but check it out. Uatu the Watcher's first comic book appearance was in Fantastic Four issue 13, where he stood around watching Marvel's First Family fighting superpowered communist monkeys and chimpanzees on the moon. That's it. That's the trivia. I just really needed to tell you about the communist super monkeys on the moon. Were they some sort of cataclysmic event that the Watcher needed to witness, or was Uatu just into some weird stuff? Anyway, what did you think of the first episode of What If, and when will we see Captain Carter pop up again? And do you think Uatu the Watcher is about to break his oath and get involved? And is live-action Jeffrey Wright going to show up in a toga with big head mode turned on at some point in the MCU? Let us know what you think in the comments. And thank you for watching this episode of Canon Fodder. For more MCU, here's what to expect from Loki Season 2. Remember to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch. We'll see you next time, true believers.